some pages which are as follows. They are talking about types of things which are not considered to be impure, as well as types of saliva and so on. Since we've spoken about impurities and things which are impure, I just want to quickly mention certain things which one may consider to be impure, but they're not actually impure. They're fine, which are as follows. Anything that does not have flowing blood in it or is not rendered impure upon death of the creature. Sorry. And they are, for example, the hair. Hair is not considered to be impurity. Sometimes one may think hair is impure or not. Hair in and of itself is not impurity. Cut feathers, the horn, the claw, bone, and other things which are not considered to be impure in and of itself. They're not najasat. Nonetheless, moving on, we want to move on to the chapter of the ritual prayer and salat, because this is actually the second pillar of Islam, and that is the pillar of salat, which is the second pillar of Islam. And preceding that was, of course, the chapter of the shahada. And we're now on lesson number, I think, 24, 25. The second pillar officially. Obviously, prior to that, we're talking about tahara, how to purify and prepare oneself for salah. Now we go into the salah itself. The prayer times are the first thing we study when it comes to prayer, as you know, because when it comes to salah, there are a few things we need to be ensuring of them. Is the fact that, for example, that the prayer time is correct, that the direction of prayer is correct, the clothes of prayer are correct, the place of prayer is correct, and the body or soul itself is in a state of ritual purity, so that salah can be correct. As for the times of the prescribed prayers, they are known to everybody, but we'll read it nonetheless. The first of them is the time of Fajr. There are 5 prayers in a day, and they are Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha. The Fajr time is from Subh al-Sadiq, true dawn, until right before sunrise. So the true dawn is referring to a horizontal white light that spreads across the horizon. If you're stuck in the middle of a desert or somewhere far away, you don't have a prayer timetable, you don't know when Salatul Fajr begins or when it ends, of course a good way to generally estimate is basically before sunrise. But if you want to pray it, if you want to know, for example, when to start fasting without a prayer timetable, then the way to look at it is to look out for something that is a horizontal white light that spreads across the horizon. A white light, a whitish kind of, it's not a light as such, but it's a sense of brightness that appears on the horizon. That is considered to be a subh al-sadiq, the true dawn, the dawn time itself. From that moment, it's Fajr time, which means your fasting starts from that time. But more importantly, if you're praying Fajr, that's when your Fajr time is applicable. You can pray Fajr now, up until just before sunrise. Sunrise refers to the disk of the sun appearing. 182 says, that is that the start of the sunrise, when the top of the disk first emerges above the horizon, the time of Fajr is now expired. So we know that Subh al-Sadiq is the beginning of Fajr time. As for its ending time is when the sun is rising, right? But does the sunrise mean just the light of the sun appearing or the actual sun appearing? It refers to the actual sun appearing. When the disk, i.e. the roundness of the sun, when a tiny bit of it appears, that's called sunrise. And when the bit of the sun appears, that's when the Fajr time actually ends. And so therefore, sometimes you may be praying Fajr and you may feel like it's bright outside, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the time of Fajr is finished. Because that brightness could be because of the imminent and upcoming sunrise, but the sun hasn't risen yet. Do you understand what I'm trying to say to you? Because sometimes you wake up and you're a bit late, you missed Jama'ah, whatever. Of course, you should be going to Jama'ah, but in the case of you missed Jama'ah, then what you should do is you should, of course, follow the prayer timetable. But if you're, for example, somewhere which didn't have a timetable and you wasn't sure, then you could easily look at the disk of the sun. If it's not appeared yet, that means the Fajr time is still there. As for the time of Dhuhr, it is from immediately after midday zawal. It's called zawal. Midday is known as zawal. Immediately after that is the beginning of the Dhuhr Salah. 183 says, the most accurate method of determining midday is to dig a stick into an even ground at a 90-degree angle and note its shadow. If it continues to shorten, it is not yet midday. Once it ceases to shorten, it is midday, and hence it is disliked to perform prayers at this time. We're trying to establish when is midday. Midday means sun is right on top. If the sun is right on top, the shadow will be right below. right below the item, whatever it is. If it's a house, if it's a stick, if it's a plane, if it's a car, whatever it is, the shadow of that thing will be immediately below it. If, say for example, the shadow is quite long still, or it's still getting shorter and shorter, then that means it's not midday yet, because the sun is not right at the zenith, at its middle point. So when the shadow of a thing is at its shortest point, that is when midday actually is, meaning the sun is right above. During the time of the midday, and during the time of when the sun is rising, i.e. from the appearance of the disk of the sun until it fully rises, that time, and during the middle of the day, when the sun is at its zenith, when it's zawal time, that is a impermissible time for prayer, i.e. you shouldn't pray any optional prayers. We shouldn't be praying at that time. According to Hanafi school law, you're not supposed to pray any salahs at this time. But according to other madhahib, if there is a salah for which there is a reason, like a hadith behind it, for example, tahiyyatul masjid, for example, tahiyyatul wudu, for example, this and that, right? Whichever salah has a reason behind it, you're allowed to pray that salah even if it's during a makruh time. But according to Hanafi school law, if it's a makruh time, you shouldn't be praying any salah at this time, with the exception of one which we'll come to inshallah later on. But the point being is, zawal is midday when the sun is above. If you, for example, can't tell when the sun is above, then you can, if you want to actually ascertain, because you're writing a timetable or something like that, or because you're not sure, because you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, then you can dig a stick, and when the shadow of the stick is at its shortest, that means sun is right above. That means that's the middle of the day. When that midday finishes and the shadow starts to lengthen, i.e. the sun has moved from its middle part, then, or middle of the sky, the zenith, the height of the sky, then dhuhr time has now begun after the midday. The time of dhuhr is immediately after midday, zawal, until the time when the shadow of any object is twice its own length, or according to the second opinion, equivalent to its own length, excluding the amount of a shadow at midday. Imam al-Tahawi preferred the second opinion, which is that of the two companions. So what we're saying is, we have the whole issue of mithil, of Asr time. When does it begin? First mithil or second mithil? Generally speaking, in the Hanafi school of law, we follow the second mithil. When the Asr time is at the second mithil, you'll see on the timetable. What does second mithil and first mithil mean? We've said this before. Mithil means that the shadow of a thing is its same length, mithlahu, same size. So if the book here, say for example, say 25 centimeters or 20 centimeters, when its shadow is also 20 centimeters, that means it's one mithil. And the reason why that's important, because we're not exactly focused on the shadow. The shadow isn't the issue. The issue is the sun. When the sun is at an angle whereby the shadow, it's the length of the item itself, that means it's one mithil. Now consider when that inclination of the sun is a bit further down, that means the shadow will get even longer, right? And so that means it's two mithil. According to the Imam Hanifa's opinion and that of and the official position of the Hanafi school of law, which is the one we follow, is that the Asr time begins when it's two mithil, which means the shadow of a thing is twice the length. Again, it's not about the shadow. It's trying to indicate where the sun is in the sky. That's what it's talking about. If someone was to pray Asr at the time of the first mithil, like the other schools of law, like Shafi'i, Hanbali, and other schools of law, then it would be correct. It's fine according to Sahibain, who are Imam Abu Yusuf and Muhammad, and also Imam al-Tahawi, who is one of the great scholars of the Hanafi school of law. So therefore, dhuhr time, let's finish that first, starts from after zawal until everything becomes, the shadow of a thing becomes the same as its length, according to the opinion which is one mithil, which is the majority, and until the shadow of a thing becomes twice its length, according to Imam Hanifa's opinion, which is official opinion of the Hanafi school of law. Either way, the safest option is that you pray Asr at second mithil, but you make sure to pray your dhuhr before the end of the first mithil. That way you're not falling into any of the difference of opinion, and you're within safe region from both opinions. So meaning zuhr re agwan zdugu shombob fora ar asr re ditio mithil অনুযায়ী পড়লে is actually agreed upon, and it's safer in that sense, because you are following, because nobody says that Asr isn't there at second mithil. The discussion is whether Asr begins at second mithil or not. But everyone agrees that when it's second mithil, Asr is definitely there, even according to Shafi'is and the Hanbalis and other schools of law. So that is the time of Dhuhr, from after Zawal up until the length of a thing becomes the same size as the shadow of a thing becomes the same size as its own length. Number three, the time of Asr is from that point on which there is a disagreement until right before sunset. Right before sunset. No, now, so then Asr begins when? Either at first mithil or second mithil, or Maghrib, first mithil or second mithil, until just before Maghrib. Meaning until before the sunset. When the sun is setting, you can see there's a redness in the sky. And then after that, the body of the sun, the disk of the sun, slowly starts to disappear into the horizon, into the ocean, into the mountains, wherever you are, right? It starts to disappear. It starts to dip. Asr, you're allowed to pray from first mithil or second mithil up until the sunset, up until the sunset itself, or before the sunset, when the sky becomes red. When the sky becomes red and the sun is about to set, that is called a makruh time. That is also a makruh time. So there are 3 times, disliked times of prayer: when the sun is rising, when the sun is in the middle of the sky, and when the sun is setting. However, at the makruh time, which is to do with sun setting, when the sun is setting, you're not allowed to pray any other prayers according to Hanafi school of law, except for one prayer, which is what? Which is the Asr of that day. Which is the Asr Salah of that day. Meaning, someone, they haven't prayed Asr today. But unfortunately, it's become very late because of laziness, because of whatever. Of course, in the future, they have to correct and rectify that mistake and the error. But it is what it is right now. They need to decide whether to pray Asr or not. They haven't prayed today's Asr yet. But the sun is becoming red. The sky is becoming red. And the sun is also nearly starting to set. It's about to set. Should they then completely miss Asr, or pray it in its makruh time? Answer is they should pray even though it is makruh time, they should still pray it. And this is according to everyone. Why? Because even though it's a makruh time, according to other schools, you can pray a salah for which there is a purpose, a hadith, a sunnah of some sort. But here this is fard. You're about to miss your fard of Asr of that day, and so therefore there is a contradiction, or there is a clash of makruh and fard. You have to do the fard even though it is makruh time, because doing the fard at a makruh time is better than missing it completely, which is haram. And so Asr is from the time of second mithil or first mithil up until before the sunset. Of course, at all times you should try to pray salah in its time, at the beginning of its time. That is preferred, in its time. Okay, and for some of the salawat, it's at the beginning of its time. Like Maghrib, you should pray immediately at the beginning of its time. As for Fajr, for example, the Prophet ﷺ used to give a small amount of time from the adhan up until the jama'ah itself. He used to give that time, and that's why masajid, they give that time as well. And that is from the sunnah as well. So that's how it works, and that's the timing of the salawat. As for the Maghrib prayer, of course now for a modern day situation, you just follow the timetable. It's very simple. But this is what is the timetable based upon? Is based upon this. Number 4, the time of Maghrib is from that point, sunset, until the disappearance of the red twilight, according to the position given for legal verdict ijtihad. So now Maghrib is very easy. When the sun has set, has become completely, it disappears. Again, same mas'ala. When the sun sets, sometimes it's still a bit bright, isn't it? Today's Maghrib, wasn't it a bit bright? But the sun had already set. That's because even though the sun set, the light is so powerful, it's still curving around the earth's roundness, right? So just because it's a bit bright doesn't mean the sun hasn't set. Sun has set, but the brightness can still appear a little bit. So our concern is, has the sun set? If the sun has set, i.e. the disk and the body of the sun has gone below the horizon, that means Maghrib time is now here. That Maghrib time will remain until there is the appearance of a red twilight in the sky. You might not be able to see it because of cloudiness, fogginess, because of horizon is filled up with buildings, but in the open desert and in the openness you should be able to see it, and that's what the prayer time is based upon. There is a red twilight, and that is usually around about an hour or so, hour and 10 minutes or so after the sun has set. after the sun has set, i.e. after Maghrib time. So usually, generally speaking, Maghrib time is usually about an hour, hour 10 minutes, hour 15 minutes in the UK. Isha time is of course longer. Fajr time is also about 1 hour 20 minutes, 1 hour 30 minutes sometimes, you know. Maghrib time, Dhuhr time is of course pretty long. Asr time is also pretty long depending on which opinion you follow. According to, if you follow the opinion of Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi, which is that of second mithl, then Asr is pretty short, considerably shorter. But Dhuhr is longer. And the opposite is true for those who follow the opinion of the Sahibain and Shafi'i, meaning that when the Asr is coming in at first mithil. So the time of Maghrib is that it is from the point of sunset until the disappearance of the red twilight, according to the position given for legal fatwa. 5, the time of Isha and Witr, the time of Isha Salah and its Witr and the Witr Salah is from that point until right before Fajr. So until from the point where you see the red twilight in the sky, i.e. Maghrib time has now ended and it starts to become dark. Okay, that's when Isha time begins, as in properly dark. That's when Isha time begins after the disappearance of the appearance of the red twilight until it's extended. Though you should pray in the on time as soon as possible. Legally speaking, if someone had to pray a bit later, they could pray, because it's a common question. Can I pray my Isha after midnight? Yes, you can, and you should, and you must. But you shouldn't make that a habit. If you are to pray, you should pray on time. And so, if the Isha time itself, it is lasting up until before the sun is up until before the sun's the sun, the Subh al-Sadiq, the Fajr time. Up until before Fajr time, there is Isha time and there is the Witr time. Now, we've understood now what are the prayer times. As for what are the preferred times to pray for each one of them. For Fajr, it is saying that as for the mustahab time to pray Fajr, it is at the time of Isfar, which is, that is, it is recommended for men to pray Fajr until a time before, of course, before sunrise, such that if one was to realize that the prayer is invalid, they would have enough time to perform ghusl and repray. Meaning there has to be enough time between when you're praying Fajr and before the sunset, such that if you had to pray ghusl or do ghusl and everything and read the whole Fajr, you'd have enough time. There has to be at least half an hour, 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes for you to pray Fajr. But ideally, of course, Fajr, you pray as soon as you can, or ideally you should pray Fajr in the Masjid al-Jama'ah. So if your local masjid is praying, say for example a bit later, you should pray at that time. If your local masjid is praying earlier, half an hour after the Fajr time begins, then you should. So Fajr time is, you should pray it, ideally the mustahab and the sunnah mu'akkada in fact is to pray in the masjid, so you should follow that timetable. For Dhuhr in the summer, when the weather becomes cooler, as for Zuhr Salah in the summertime when it's extremely hot, it is allowed and is mustahab, preferred, mustahab, to delay the Zuhr time a bit, but of course we follow the timetable 1:30 throughout the summer time. For Asr, to delay until for Asr also there is a mustahab time mentioned here. For Dhuhr in the winter and for Maghrib always to pray. For Dhuhr now when it's winter time, and for Maghrib especially, it is mustahab time is to pray as soon as the time has entered, and so on. There are 3 other times, of course, as we've said before, which is 3 times of the day in which prayers that are obligatory before these times are rendered invalid or a makruh basically. And we've said this before: sunrise, midday. You can't pray Fajr at sunrise, can you? You can't pray Dhuhr at midday, can you? So it's going to be invalid, except for sunset, unless you're praying Asr of that day, as we've just said, because it's when you have to choose between, should I miss it completely or should I pray at makruh time? And of course the preference is given to praying it before the time is ended. Voluntary and nafil salahs shouldn't be prayed and are not allowed to be prayed at some times. Voluntary salahs you can pray, of course it's open, you can pray anytime, but there are some times you're not allowed to pray. Of them is the 3 above: sunrise, midday and sunset. During a religious sermon, during the khutbah time, you're not allowed to pray any voluntary prayers. Before the obligatory prayer of Fajr, if the obligatory prayer has begun, then you have to join the obligatory prayer. with the exception of Fajr, they say, ulama say that if there is enough time for you to pray the Sunnah and join the Jama'ah, if you, for example, for some reason have missed your Sunnah, but you have enough time to pray your Sunnah and then join the Fajr as well, the Jama'ah, then you are allowed to do so. So therefore, before the obligatory prayer of Fajr, you are not allowed to pray any other optional prayers. Before the Fajr Sunnah, or before, except for the Fajr Sunnah itself, you're not allowed to pray any other optional prayers. After the obligatory prayer of Fajr is performed, without exception. So after the Fajr Salah is finished now, can I pray some more Nafal Salah until sunrise? You can't. No Nafal Salah is allowed to be prayed at that time. After the Asr prayer is performed until sunset, no Nafal Salah is allowed to be prayed. So what are the times that you're not allowed to pray Nafal Salah? Makruh times, which are sunrise, midday and sunset, as well as, on top of that, during the time of a khutbah, as well as before Fajr. From the beginning of Fajr time until before Fajr, except for the Sunnah of Fajr itself. Yes.
What about when you enter the masjid?
Your Sunnah of Fajr will be sufficing for that.
So are you advising to not pray?
According to Hanafi school of law, there is no other optional prayers. Of course, unless it's for the Tahiyyatul Masjid, there could, Wallahu A'lam, be made an exception, but it's saying there is no optional prayers of Fajr. 197, let's read the footnote what it's saying. That is, after the time of Fajr and time has entered, yet before the actual performance of the obligatory Fajr prayer. Can you pray Tahiyyatul Masjid at the time? Let me double check. I've had that question a few times.
Because the problem is, obviously, for the Sunnah, you should pray the Sunnah at home.
Yeah.
So now you pray the Sunnah at home, now you've come in.
Should you pray Tahiyyatul Masjid still? Let me see. Let me double check, inshallah. Of course, according to other schools, there will be no problem. We're talking about the Hanafi school here, in specific. Okay, after the obligatory prayer of Fajr, of course, after the Fajr prayer, you don't pray any Nafal Salahs. We know that, we agree on that. No one disagrees on that. After the Asr prayer, until the sunset, there is no Nafal Salah. Should not be prayed, unless, of course, in the Hanafi school especially, but in other schools, if there's a reason for that prayer, like entrance into the masjid, or Tahiyyatul Masjid, then that would be jais. It's making a note about combining prayers. It is not valid to combine any two obligatory prayers in one prayer time except in Arafat and Muzdalifah. That is, the pilgrim on Hajj may combine Zuhr and Asr in the time of Zuhr and the day of Arafah, and must delay Maghrib at the time until the time of Isha and Muzdalifah. So this is the Hanafi opinion, that you have to pray all of the Salahs in their due time. Inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. You have to pray them on time, whether you are muqim or musafir. So are you allowed to join between prayers when you're a musafir? Generally no, but according to some ulama in the Hanafi school, perhaps you'll find that it is jaiz, but officially you shouldn't, because especially where there is no excuse. Especially where there is no excuse. If someone had a very big excuse, we know that in Arafah and Muzdalifah, we join the prayers. That's agreed upon. But generally, in the state of Safar, should you join prayers? There is a big bahth on that. And it's very interesting. Where, for example, a lot of brothers and sisters will be like, for example, they are traveling from London to Birmingham. Okay? They know that the journey is going to take them 2 to 3 hours or 3 to 4 hours, whatever, depending how fast you drive, how the traffic situation. You know that you can pray Dhuhr comfortably here, and you can pray Asr comfortably over there. So, luxuriously you can pray, no problem at all. It's not going to cause you any difficulty or whatsoever. Some people will still prefer to pray Dhuhr and Asr in one go because they're traveling. Is it jaiz according to some ulama? According to, for example, the madhahib that say you are allowed to join prayers if you're in Safar, like the Shafi'i school of law and others, right? But according to the Hanafi school of law, you are not allowed to join the prayers, whether you are muqim or musafir, because every salah should be prayed in and of its time, which has been stipulated by the Quran and Sunnah.
When you said join the prayer, does it mean like pray one salah then immediately after salah?
Yeah. For example, pray Zuhr and Asr at Zuhr time. Pray Zuhr and then pray Asr straight after.
Not like literally.
No, as in joining into one. We're talking about joining in the same time. Okay, it's an old discussion. Ultimately speaking, you should follow. You should try to pray each of the salah in its own time. Okay, unless of course there is going to be undue difficulty by, for example, you're about to board a plane. You're about to board a plane. You don't know. For example, if you're about to board a plane and it's Zuhr time, you have no idea which way the Qibla will be in the plane when you're traveling. You have no idea whether you'll be able to do wudu properly or not. You have no idea whether you'll be able to do ruku' and sujood properly or not. Okay, all of that is possibility. There's so many barriers. So these are difficulties you have to face if you want to pray. Like for example, Zuhr you can pray on time because you're in the airport. But Asr you're not sure what's going to happen. You could be in the air, you're sitting down, you don't know if you're going to have wudu, you don't know if you're going to be facing Qibla. All of these issues do you see. Other option is, khalas, I take the opinion that you're allowed to join prayer because you're in the state of safar and abstain from and bypass all of that undue difficulty. So in a situation like that, I would myself, of course, if you want to follow, I'm not saying I'm an example, but I would join here. I would tell my family to join as well because look, you're going to get on a plane and etc. And it is jaiz. It is jaiz according to other schools of law, and so therefore joining here, I would say Bismillah. But of course, if you want to be consistent with that, which is that it should be prayed in its own time, and so you wait for Asr time when you're in the plane, and you try to arrange for prayer in the plane. If not, then you pray in your seat and so on. All of that you can do. It's not a problem. It's jaiz, of course, and it's it's what you should do according to this opinion. Okay, the next section is talking about the call to prayer, adhan and iqama. Inshallah, we'll leave that. We'll do piece by piece and slowly. Are there any questions?
If there is a jama'ah for the first mission, obviously one follows the second mission, but he's in a place where he knows there's not many jama'ah going. For example,
Definitely follow the jama'ah. Yeah, for example, if you're in Egypt and you know Asr is going to be prayed at first mithil, should you pray at first mithil or should you wait to second mithil and miss jama'ah? Of course you should pray first mithil and join the jama'ah.
Roughly, how long does the sun start to set for Maghrib, or is it exactly when Maghrib starts? That's why it's allocated at that time.
Say the question again.
So when the sun starts to set, the Maghrib time, that exact time is that.
No, the sun Maghrib time starts after the sun has set. How long does it take for it to set? It takes about 10 to 12 minutes, about 10ish kind of minutes. I think maybe less than that. I'm not sure. You can Google it. Yeah, but you should wait for a bit more after that as well. You should give it a bit of time, and then yes, after that the adhan of Maghrib will be called. Go on, let this brother ask that question. You're so far, man. I'm gonna have to give you a microphone. No, it's fine. Say it from there so I can hear you.
Okay, so I have a book. In the book, it says that we should pray. Like, I don't understand. Basically, it says 4 plus 2 sunnah rak'ah after the Jummah prayer.
Yes, according to this is the Hanafi opinion, that after the sunnah prayer, after Jummah prayer, there is 4 rak'at of sunnah, and then also 2 more.
So what I'm confused of is, what does it say 4 plus 2?
As in 4 rak'at and then 2 rak'at.
Oh, so okay.
4 rak'at salam and then 2 rak'at as well.
Okay. You said during the khutbah, it's not good time to pray nafil salah. What if you started the salah and then the imam he's come to start?
So you're about to pray your sunnat, and the imam has started. You should finish it quickly. As in, not break it, but finish it quickly. That's it?
I had one last one.
What?
Is it a major issue? Because I understand it's not wajib of Salahs, it's the wajib of the Quran that the first rak'ah should be, your recitation should be longer than the second one. But obviously, sometimes you don't really think about what surah you're going to recite.
Yeah.
And turns out that the second rak'ah was actually quite longer than the first one.
Yeah.
It's not a major issue.
It's not a major issue. It's fine. But ideally, it should be first rak'ah longer, yes.
When you pray sunnah on your own, obviously, do you need to maintain, when you recite the verses of the Quran, do you need to maintain the tasbih rules, or?
Yes, you should. Yeah, because tajweed is a part of Quran, and the Quran is a part of Salah. So you should recite nice and slowly and composed with tajweed. Yes, sir.
The first rak'ah, when you're reciting the surah after Surah Fatiha, does it have to be in the order of the Quran?
It should be in the order of the Quran. Not being in the order of the Quran will not damage the Salah, but it's preferred and it's sunnah that it should be in order of the Quran. If someone accidentally misplaced the order, i.e. read from the end and then from the start and the second rak'ah before, then he would be mildly disliked. It would not cause any sin whatsoever unless someone was persistent on it.
Deliberately, you shouldn't be.
No. Deliberately should be trying to maintain the order. Yes. So first rak'ah from the beginning and then the second rak'ah after that, like that. Inshallah. Mushraf.
Now you said there's at the makruh times you have to have a reason to pray. Qiyam al-Hadith and stuff. Does qada come under that?
No, according to the Hanafi school of law, qada doesn't come under that. In fact, I don't think it'd be coming under the other ones as well. We're talking about reasons for praying at that particular time. That would be tahiyatul masjid, tahiyatul wudu. Qada itself, you don't necessarily have to pray at that particular time, do you? You can pray at any other time. So at makruh time, you shouldn't be praying any prayers, unless it's the asr of that day at sunset time.
What if you keep the order of the salah, and you've got other.
Yeah. What about it?
So, for example, it's makruh time now.
Yep.
But you haven't prayed the previous salah, and which has now become qada.
So what you do is you pray the salah which you're about to. You save what you can. You can save asr, then you can pray your dhuhr qada afterwards. Because if it's that, unless of course you know that there is enough time, even though it's kind of getting late, you can pray quickly 4 rak'at of dhuhr and then asr as well. And you are a sahib al-tartib, someone who's missed less than 5 salawat, then you should do that. But if it's choosing between praying asr on time, even though there's only a little bit left, and or maintaining the order, then of course praying asr on its time is more important, because that is the fard. The other one is qada. It's qada. Praying it now will not change the fact that it's qada.
I don't understand what you said about the rule of 5 salahs in the day. Is there a special rule like?
Yeah. So there is, I believe in the Hanafi school. I don't know if it's in the other school, but basically there is someone who's missed less than 5 qada or 5 salahs. It's called a sahib al-tartib, someone who has maintained the order of their salahs in their life and has to maintain the order, which means that if you've only got 5 salahs left, that means it's a day's worth. That means before you start your next fard, actual official prayer of the day, you should try to make up for those, because it's easy, it's manageable. But if it's more than that, then it's not manageable. It's difficult for you to pray 6 salahs or 7 salahs or 10 salahs. So therefore, for the school of law to require you to do that, it would be an undue difficulty. But it's basically saying that you should do your qada. And if it's a little bit, try to do it right now before you go to the next salah. When and where possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but if you're struck for time,
Of course,
so
you should pray.
salvage what you
Yes, pray the salah of the time, yes. And then you do your qada
then
after.
you do your qada.
Yes. Yes, brother, yes.
How fast are you allowed to recite the Quran in Sunnah?
You're allowed to pray speedily as long as you are maintaining pronunciation of the letters and ghunna, the wajib rules of tajweed and so on. So you can say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen Rahman Rahim Malik Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim as-sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. You've managed to maintain the rules of tajweed, but at a fast pace. Slowness is not a rule of tajweed. Slowness is extending the tilawah, which is fine, it's jaiz, of course allowed, and it's from the sunnah. But you can read fast and also maintain tajweed. But if you read too fast, then you're not going to be able to maintain tajweed as well. If you read so fast that you can't even pronounce the letters correctly, then that's a problem. Yes.
One last question.
Yes, no problem.
In regard to sujood al-sahwi, obviously if you're following the Hanafi opinion, but even then you've forgotten to do sujood al-sahwi and you're right at the end, then can you just follow the Shafi opinion? Can you do that?
Interesting question.
And if not, what would you do in that case?
So what that means is, you've basically given salams. As in, instead of doing sajda sahwi, you've ended your salah.
So in the Hanafi school of law, it's atahiyat then taslim,
Yeah.
and sujood then you back up the atahiyat again. You're not atahiyat to Allahumma salli ala Allahumma barik Allah, Allahumma inni dhalamtu. Just before you do taslim, you remember, oh hang on, I'm supposed to sujood al-sahwi, I've forgotten now. In that case, can you just follow the Shafi?
No, it's not that bad yet. All you can do is do the sajda sahwi, and then do tahiyat again, and then give salam. But if you had, after you're talking about when you've actually given salam, you've ended your salah, but you haven't spoken yet.
What would you do in that case?
That's an interesting question as well. I'll have to double check how contradictory it is. I mean, obviously, according to other schools, you can just give salam. You can just give it. Sorry, you can just give it a sajda, and that would be fine because it is also worded and happened in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ.
Do you do taslim after that?
I don't think you have to.
Left the salah.
But again, please remind me to answer these questions next time. You had this one, which said the sahu after salah, and what's the other one you asked before?
Quite a few questions for you.
You asked another one before, which I said it's very interesting. Did anyone have a question before that? No. Any other questions? Yes, Nabil.
It's related to the sajda. So basically, I think you told me that if you're praying behind the imam and you make a mistake, then you don't have to pray the sajda. So is that right? Or
Yes, because if you're praying behind the imam's salah is covering your salah. The imam is there is a hadith that says al-imam damin. The imam is the guarantor. So your mistakes will be covered by the imam. Inshallah. Unless of course something very major like you didn't do wudu or something. Imam can't cover that.
What about when you say you miss one rak'ah with the imam, and then like you get up to complete your one rak'ah, and then you make that mistake, so therefore you have to.
Yeah, of course. When you're doing the part by yourself, then there is no imam there, so you've got to make sure you do it right. Yes. But so long as you're praying behind the imam, then minor mistakes like you forgot your subhanallah bil-a'la, subhanallah bil-azim, those kind of minor errors within the salah, you will be covered.
but
Not major stuff like, for example, you're not in tahara. That's just not going to work. Salah imam can't carry that.
what if you don't say Allah Akbar?
Takbir al-tahrima, then that's going to be another problem as well. You have to do takbir al-tahrima. It's from the arkan of the salah. جاء نقول لك جي نا فران يوم مقتدي ترى فران يوم جي جنازنا ما شغله فران جي سورة فاتحة أنا في سكول أنا جاي إتا فاتحة ناي أمر سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وتبارك اسمك وتعالى جدك ولا إله غيرك ترفع الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد until the end اللهم بارك على محمد until the end الله أكبر and then اللهم اغفر لحينا then add to يا أخوان بروشة مهيلة اللهم اغفر لحينا وميتنا وشاهدنا وغائبنا وصغيرنا وكبيرنا وذكرنا وأنثانا اللهم من أحييته منا فأحيي على الإسلام وأن توفيته منا فتوفى على الإيمان until then and then الله أكبر and then salam. What was the other question?
There are some contradictory opinions about whether if what you've left out or what you've added to the salah is not fard anyway. You don't need to do the salah for that, do you? If you leave something out, that's not
Wajib, you mean? Wajib.
Yeah, sorry, that's not wajib.
That's below wajib, like as in sunnah. From the sunnah. You don't have to know. What was the other question that you asked me? Does anyone
You
remember?
have to watch the replay.
What was it?
You have to watch the replay. He's saying.
Oh, no, it must be
Is the imam sutra? The imam the sutra for the people praying behind him? If so, would it be permitted to walk between the rows according to the Hanafi madhab? No, you would not be allowed to walk between the rows. And the imam is the sutra for the jama'ah as in the first saf. You can walk in front of the first saf, but as for individual sufuf, you shouldn't be walking between them. That would be against the adab of the salah and everything. So the imam is, if you have a sutra and a cover in front of the imam, then that would be covering the first row and the imam himself and the jama'ah, of course. But that doesn't mean you should be walking between the rows. Yes, go on.
So let's say a space frees up in
Yep.
front of you.
You should take a step forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should take a step forward. As you should cover the space in as minimal steps as possible, minimal movement as possible. طيب, that's good. We had enough questions. We had good questions. Okay, remind me of that question, inshallah, and inshallah we'll get those covered. Jazakumullah khair. And tomorrow's hadith. Yes, akhi.
One last question.
Yes.
I just wanted to, I think you've answered it, but I was so sajdat as-sahwi you do it if you've missed a wajib.
Wajib, yes.
But sunnah if you missed.
You don't have to know. You don't have to know. Yes. Sajdat sahwi is for missing a wajib, and also not work if he has a fard. If you missed one of the arkan, then sajdat sahwi can't help with that. Yeah, you'd have to do the salah again. For example, someone missed the whole ruku' and sujood, or missed takbir al-tahrima, or didn't recite Fatiha at all, didn't recite any Quran at all, then that would be missing a rukun and a fard, so therefore you have to repeat the salah.
One common problem that I
So yeah, that in that case, you just, to the best of your knowledge, you go with that.
So say if I'm uncertain, if I've done two sajda, shall I do a sajda and then do sajda to sahu in case? What should I do?
No, if you're uncertain, so you don't know if you've done one sajda or two sajda. Here it wouldn't help because if you
Two sajdas are fard.
fard,
Yeah.
they're not.
So suppose like I'm done. I think I might have done two sajdas, right? But
Mhm.
I'm uncertain. So what would it be the best thing?
The best thing to do is to make sure, into the best of your knowledge, that you do two sajdas.
So I should do another one.
You should do another one.
Another one.
Yes,
Do I need
because
do
you're supposed to.
sajda
Yes.
because
Sorry.
of that uncertainty?
Say that again.
Should I do as in you? I don't
So,
need
for
to-
example, you've done sajdas, and right now you're still in that position of sajda,
Mm.
and you think you've done one. You ask yourself the question quickly: have I done one or two? And your heart is more inclined towards one. Khalas, do another one. If your heart is inclined towards two, that means you've done two. You have to follow your dhan, as in what your mind is saying to be the more, the bigger probability, basically. Yeah, the greater possibility. And yeah, خلاص. سبحانك اللهم أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.